Today, British doctors still call the room where they perform surgery the theater. And here you can see why. This is the operating theater at the old St. Thomas's Hospital in London. It dates back to 1822. 150 years ago, medical students would gather around this table and watch the great surgeons of the day amputate a leg or try to remove a tumor. The fact is, without anesthetics or sterile instruments, the patient's chances of survival were slim to none. The horrors of Victorian surgery are a thing of the past, thank heaven. But in Britain recently, there's been renewed scientific interest in some even older medical practices.
This is just one of the tanks at Biopharm, the world's only leech farm. These are medicinal leeches, bred by the tens of thousands and kept in perfect condition on a regular diet of animal blood. Lab technician Dave Kenny took the job on the farm because he loves working with animals.
They have got sort of personalities. I mean, they'll try and eat you, but you don't give them the chance. I mean, if you do give them the chance, they'll take it.
Next door, Dave's colleague Pete Miller is working with another species of bloodsucker, the giant Amazonian leech, which can grow up to 18 inches long. This pregnant female, carrying hundreds of immature leeches in yellow yolk sacs under her belly, is one of the farm's most prized animals. Kept in conditions that exactly replicate the heat and humidity of her Brazilian homeland, she will produce hundreds of new leeches for the farm. And these are the Amazon babies. They've already developed the leech's primary instinct. Swim toward anything that moves, and when you hit something solid, grab hold and start feeding. You may feel the world would be a better place without leeches, but here at Biopharm, they disagree. Roy Sawyer on the left is the founder of Biopharm and a scientist who's probably the world's biggest leech fan.
They feed on these aquatic birds.
Today, he's searching for rare wild leeches.
We've never been along that far bank, so a big stretch there, but it's so hard to work.
Although the swimmers don't know it, this popular Welsh pond is one of the few places in Britain where the medicinal leech can be found. If you're the world's greatest leech expert, how do you go about catching leeches?
One way is to look under objects like rocks, because they attach on the underside. The other way is to go to a locality like near the reeds and stay in one site, but keep moving, and they'll come swimming toward you. And you just check your legs from time to time. Here's a rock. Let's try this.
After years in the field, Roy has become an excellent judge of where to look for leeches. And here's a promising find.
This is the horse leech.
It certainly looks disgusting enough to be the real thing, but in fact there's no cause for alarm.
I think if most people had come across this leech, they would be terrified, probably. In fact, it doesn't suck blood, and there's no reason to be afraid of it.
Hunting for rare animals always takes time, and Roy and his colleagues spend most of the day checking under rocks and wading through reeds without finding their quarry. But at last, success.
Oh, here's one. Gosh, that's a beauty.
This slimy little fellow is the genuine article.
Well, this is the medicinal leech, which is lives in this pond, one of the few localities where the medicinal leech lives.
Fortunately, this one must have just had a good meal. Otherwise, it would already have tried to draw blood from Roy's hand. But, strange as it might seem, in Britain's past, many people would have welcomed the idea of the leech feeding on their blood. Headache? Muscle pain? Or any other ailment? The medical texts of 600 years ago show the treatment that most doctors recommended was bloodletting. And beneath these wind-swept Scottish moors, the secrets of bloodletting, buried for centuries, are being uncovered. 20 miles south of Edinburgh lie the ruins of the monastic hospital of Sutra, abandoned for 500 years, but in its heyday known throughout Europe as a major medical center. Archaeologists Brian Moffat and John Triscutt began their excavations here 4 years ago. At first, the site proved disappointing. They couldn't turn up evidence of surgical instruments or herbal preparations. But what they now have found is an archaeological first. These are the sewers of a medieval hospital.
1,100 feet up. Analysis of medical waste from the 12th century all the way through to the 16th century, which is accumulated here, will tell us exactly what medicine, what type of medicine was practiced here. This is a completely unknown research area.
Because of the unknowns, the archaeologists have no idea how hazardous their work might be. So, Brian takes some basic precautions before examining the soil in the hospital's drainage ditches. It still could contain traces of medieval disease.
The samples I've just taken are from the deposits in the bottom of the cellar, where we have reason to believe there's been seepage of human blood from the sewage pipes of this hospital.
The equipment is a sophisticated medical test kit designed to detect internal bleeding. But it's being used to look for traces of blood from patients who lived and died in this hospital's wards 200 years before Columbus. A faint blue stain slowly develops. Blood, locked for centuries in the Scottish clay, behaves as if it was spilled yesterday.
We were rather astonished at the scale of bloodletting at this hospital. Massive dumps of blood occur in every trench we have dug. In other words, blood was the main output of a medieval hospital.
Edinburgh, Scotland's capital today. It was a bustling city 600 years ago, and only a day's march from the hospital at Sutra. In the National Library, Brian is using original manuscripts to retrace the steps a medieval doctor would have taken in treating his patients. Bloodletting from specific points in the body was intended to bring the sick patient back into balance, both physically and spiritually. At a hospital like Sutra, the routine demanded monthly bleeding to unconsciousness. So the archaeologists calculate that these hillsides are soaked with up to 50,000 gallons of human blood.
We hope to be able to establish blood group, general health, a whole host of reflections on the health of the medieval population of Scotland.
A political dispute eventually closed the hospital at Sutra, and by 1600 it had fallen into ruins. But that did not mean an end to bloodletting in Britain. Far from it. The idea that bleeding somehow restored balance lingered on for centuries. The only change was in how to do it. 200 years ago, bloodletting using leeches was still the miracle cure. And even today, leeches can be just what the doctor ordered. For hospital nurse Lisa Twyford, leeches are no longer a universal treatment, but they are particularly good for one special application, if you can first come to grips with them. This container arrived by special delivery from Roy Sawyer's Leech Farm. They now ship medicinal leeches all over the world to be used by microsurgery patients like Mark Smith. Mark nearly lost a finger in an industrial accident. Surgeons were able to reattach it, but now there are new problems, common in this kind of case. The main artery taking blood to the finger was successfully repaired, but reconnecting the much smaller veins proved close to impossible. So now the blood is flowing in, but not out. The finger is becoming dangerously congested. And that's where the leeches come in. They'll be able to remove the blood from Mark's congested finger during the week-long period that it will take for the veins to heal. Mark may look a little skeptical, but in fact, surgeons have found that this is a perfect way to help nature along. Mark's swollen finger is an attractive spot for the leech, especially since it's been deliberately shipped from the farm unfed. It is a slow and painless feeding process, and after 30 minutes, this one animal has significantly reduced the congestion.
the leech has had a good feed. He's taken quite a lot of the congested blood away, so that's a good sign. He may need another couple of leeches, perhaps another hour or two further up the finger to take some more of that congested blood away, but yes, quite successful.
When the leech is full, it will just drop off. But bleeding will continue for several hours, and that is because of the way a leech feeds. Much of Biopharm's research is into these gory feeding details. This leech, sewn inside a sausage skin, has been tricked into feeding on a fluid that is chemically similar to human blood. 3 tiny jaws cut into the skin to start the bleeding. Now, normally the blood would rapidly clot, but somehow the leech prevents that so that it can keep on feeding. Now that's the part that interests Roy Sawyer.
When the medicinal leech is feeding, it secretes a range of biochemicals. For example, the anticoagulant hyrudin, which prevents the blood from clotting. The reason that the leech has it is to prevent the blood from clotting in its gut. Otherwise, it would be like having cement in its gut.
If the anti-clotting agent hyrudin can keep the leech alive, could it do the same for humans? Now that's what Roy Sawyer hopes, and right now they're working on producing enough purified hyrudin for use in medical trials. The leech makes a host of intriguing compounds, and all designed to help it feed. There's an anesthetic, an antibiotic, and several other chemicals active on blood. But the first of the compounds to come into general use will be hyrudin. Roy Sawyer demonstrates how it'll work against the clots that cause heart attacks. He's taking fibrinogen, the main agent that forms clots in human blood, and putting it into 2 test tubes. The one on the left contains leech hyrudin. Within seconds, the fibrinogen in the right-hand tube forms a clot. But in the treated sample, it's still flowing freely.
The importance of this type of chemical to prevent the blood from clotting is that it will prevent such a clot from forming inside of the heart muscle itself. This would be a coronary thrombosis if this were in the heart.
Because leech blood-sucking compounds are entirely natural, the hope is that they'll be both effective and free of side effects. So, perhaps what makes the leech so loathsome could also make it extremely valuable. Down on the farm, Pete Miller sums up.
Some people call them ugly, slimy, horrible animals, in which they are, to a point, quite right, because they are slimy little animals. But looking at these from a medical point of view or a scientific point of view, these animals could teach us a lot.